I had people on my team that were physically threatened by actors. We had to put people into secure housing because they were successfully doxxed by the attackers.
Alex.
I'm the Chief Product Officer at Semperis. Semperis' thing is all about true cyber resilience through identity security and crisis management. We have this assumption that the eventual breach is a when, not an if. It's catastrophic if you lose control of your identity system. Once you lose control of that, you lose control of everything. And if that goes down, it's for a lot of companies is an extinction event because everything stops. How do we harden our identity systems? Because without them, they're doomed. We should recognize what's at stake for cybersecurity. We tend to think about like, oh no, I lost control of my directory. Let's talk about what that means in the hospital. I mean, surgeries don't happen. Planes don't fly. People die.
Yeah.
There's like catastrophic events that happen on the back end of an identity system going down. What we do as an industry is really, really important.
So important. Welcome to the Hubscale Podcast, the RSA Series 2026, where we shine the light on vendors and VCs making moves this week. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. It's great to have you.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate being here.
Amazing. Look, Alex, we've obviously got a lot to chat about. Acquisition, the documentary. But let's kick us off. Just a quick intro to you, Alex. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Semperis.
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Product Officer at Semperis. I came to Semperis about not quite a year ago from Microsoft, where I spent 30 years, and I built the identity protection team, which does things like conditional access and multi-factor auth and a bunch of other incident response and all things identity security. So that was an incredible experience, and it was like a great honor to work with and build that team. I went on sabbatical in January, and I was looking around for the next problem, and I kind of figured identity security wasn't solved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of where things are going is really more about infrastructure attacks. So you're less worried about losing an account and more worried about losing control of the identity system itself. And Semperis was really focused on that problem. So Semperis' thing is all about true cyber resilience through identity security and crisis management. Those kind of things all fit together in the context of if your identity system goes down, you've got a crisis on your hands, you can't use your normal way of communicating. You know, if you're bringing your identity system back up, you want to make sure you're not bringing the attacker back into that environment. You want to make sure that the vulnerabilities they use to penetrate the environment aren't still there. So all these things kind of fit together. And we have the, sort of the wheel of doom, which is, like before, during, and after the attack, right? And what are the things you need to be doing in each of those phases? And we provide the tools for that. So that's kind of Semperis in a nutshell.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
And enjoying it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. Great time. Lots of fun.
Love that. Well, look, we'll kick us off with RSA.
All right.
As we're here.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about obviously what's been going on and what your big takeaways are. I know it's only been a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us a little bit.
Well, I mean, one of the things about RSA that's amusing is that, so much happens around RSA.
Yeah.
There's meetings at every hotel in town, and there's, all your friends are here from, your time in the industry or whatever. So it's been a lot of fun to catch up with people, a lot of fun to hear what people are focused on. Of course, I think, you almost hate to say it because you're going to have to say it, but we can't ignore kind of the impact of both generative AI and agentic on the security landscape. And I think when you recognize that there's so much that we can't predict about how these technologies are going to work in practice, whether they're controlled by an attacker or a defender or just running the business, that the boundaries you put around that infrastructure become super, super important. Identity is how you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think about agentic, if you're going to go consume a service, you have to authenticate your agent, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to go act on behalf of somebody, you're acting on behalf of somebody who has identity in the system, right? All these things are backed by accounts. So the identity infrastructure, literally, if it goes down, all your agentic stuff stops, comes to a crashing halt, right? And so both the need for identity to be really robust if you want to take advantage of agentic, and also the need to make sure that you're being absolutely disciplined about, closing off the exposure points and any vulnerabilities in the identity infrastructure, any over-permissioning. And again, our focus tends to be on, it's a bummer if you lose control of your SharePoint files, right? But it's catastrophic if you lose control of your identity system, right? Okay. The thing that we saw in the advanced attacks, starting really at SolarWinds and going forward, Storm of 558 and Midnight Blizzard, all these really big attacks, were the attacks on the identity infrastructure itself. So once you lose control of that, you lose control of everything, right? And if that goes down, it's for a lot of companies is extinction events because everything stops.
Yeah.
Right?
You've mentioned obviously, a couple of the words there that is everywhere in obviously RSA and everywhere on the billboards. And that's agentic AI.
Right.
What are your thoughts in terms of things being maybe overhyped in that sort of domain? Or well, what have you been seeing? What are your thoughts on it all?
We have only just met, and so you'll have to take my word for this. I hate that kind of hype. Like I hate that kind of hype. So when I say this, like I say, it's hard for me to say it. I don't think it's overhyped. I think it's maybe underhyped. And this is the way I think about it. Like I've been in the security business for 30 years, right? I'm the person who turned on MFA at Microsoft for all of our customers and, proofed up like 2 billion people. Like I'm in this thing deeply. Spent 10 years trying to get people to turn on MFA. And I think we can all agree that MFA is like the most basic thing you would do to protect your environment. I guess if you can't do that, like you're just not, I used to say you're not even playing, you're not doing that. Despite that, and despite all the programs and all the efforts we made, we were up around 50% now. So about 50% of enterprises are using MFA.
Okay.
That's insanity. That's like so bad, right? So you think about the security debt that people are carrying, it's vast. Think about over-permissioning. Over-permissioning is an amazing thing. The studies we've done on that show that it's like mind-boggling. 1% of issued permissions are actually used. 1%. 1%. For apps, that goes up to a whopping 5%, right? Because apps are slightly more consumptive. 80% of apps are abandoned, right? 80% of the apps that are deployed that have credentials in the environment are not used for the business at all. They were tested and forgotten. They retain their permissions. So think about like that exposure space, and the thing that has saved us in some way, and it's security people will say they hate this, but security to obscurity has actually worked out for us, right? Like I had permissions to see the secret recipe, but I didn't know it. So I never looked for the file, so I never found it. Or I had permissions, I didn't know it, but I had permissions to modify the group that actually sets who's the admin in the environment. I didn't know I had that permissions when I never used it, right? All these over-permissionings that exist in the environment, right? Agentic will explore those permissions. Like I need to find the most efficient way to do my task. Let me go explore all my options to see what's the most efficient way I can do my task. And suddenly all of that sort of undiscovered dark space around the pathway is discovered. And now it's exploitable, right? It's exploitable if you want to do something terrifying. If you have an environment you can do this in and you're confident enough to do it. Ask your agentic search tool to summarize known vulnerabilities in your environment.
Nice.
Like, tell me about the known vulnerabilities. I mean, you can be a salesperson in that company. Ask the question, see what you got, right? It's terrifying if you think about what is required to do recon and how low that bar is, and then how fast these vulnerabilities will be discovered. And so that's where I'd say like the APR, the annual percentage rate you're paying on that like security debt is about to go through the roof.
Wow.
Right? And if you don't pay that debt down now, it's going to be a catastrophic cost later. So that's where I think we're at. And I think that unfortunately, the anthropology of organizations and security says that we're going to continue to have a bunch of security people like me saying that until you start to see, the companies falling, and then everybody will kind of, oh wait, this is serious. But I think it's going to be serious.
So you think that's what's going to change the way people think?
I think the agentic attacks are going to accelerate, and frankly, the agentic accidents are going to accelerate. The things that happen when an employee brings OpenClaw into the corporate environment and asks it to start achieving tasks. And again, it does unfettered access to all the over-permissioning. It's not that the systems are violating the rules, it's they're discovering the space they have.
Yeah.
Right? And they also violate rules sometimes, but that's a different problem. So I think the main thing we all need to be doing right now is thinking about how do we harden our identity systems? First of all, protect them, because without them, you're doomed. And so that's thing one, make sure it's resilient, make sure it's secure. And then thing two is use that system to try to govern the space down so that a given employee in your environment really only has access to what they need. A given app really only has access to what it needs. And if the app isn't being used, it doesn't need anything. You can mention it. Everybody has too many priorities. Everybody's got too much to do.
Yeah.
And so I know, again, 30 years of doing this, I would say, I know that for most people, they're going to hear this and be, yeah, but I'm working on all these other programs. And I'm just say, hey, don't say we didn't warn you, right? Like it's coming. That's my answer.
That's it.
Yeah.
What's been one conversation that you've had over the last sort of 24, 48 hours that's maybe made you rethink something in the domain in the space?
I think, so I worked for Entra. So I went to work, I started the identity security team in like 2010 more or less at Xbox, and then we kind of kept getting bigger. But in 2014, I went to work for Entra. So we merged the consumer and the enterprise identity systems together. And as you would imagine, doing a cloud identity provider, like a big cloud IDP, all of our conversations were like, you need to move to cloud, you need to move to cloud, you need to move to cloud, right? So what's surprising me is actually there's a counter pressure, right? Data sovereignty, the need for really good resilience, frankly, concern about government influence into corporations that are hosting this data. There's like a lot of concerns where more and more people are saying, look, I need to start bringing this back. And I think the industry is responding. So when you get into this space where it's like, suddenly it's like, no, actually I do need to run, say, my core file servers on-prem.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and moreover, that in a way that is independent of my cloud provider. Right. You get into this very interesting place where suddenly Active Directory is getting more relevant again.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the thing that we keep saying we're going to try to get rid of, it's coming back as a core technology to support these kinds of deployments. I talked to a customer yesterday, and I can't name them, but they're running massive environment and it's highly resilient, highly compartmentalized, and their design point for operations is that the internet itself can go down. Right. So they're running their own data centers, they're running their own storage, they're running their own directory servers, they run isolation between these things, they have their own, WAN going in between them. They're like, they're bringing the 80s back, man. And you can see why. And their arguments are solid arguments. And I guess that's the thing that surprised me is that I'm seeing more and more of these cases where people are saying, no, actually there's a real place for isolation and for the on-prem deployment. It'll be very interesting to see how these things end up balancing out.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Get into. I can see why you've been in for a long time. And that's
super fun.
Yeah. What's obviously moving on to specifically Semperis? I suppose tell me a little bit more about what's going on in your world in terms of the product standpoint. What can you tell us about? Yeah.
Sure.
Happening?
There's a couple things going on that are exciting, right? One is that we have a set of products that Semperis was born about 10 years ago, really of Active Directory resilience, right? So there's a product called ADFR, which does forest recovery in an automated way and does it, I think I believe it's at the best level in the industry. It's very, very high quality. And then we have a thing called DSP, which is in similar nature, watches all the changes that happen in that environment. So if somebody fat fingers, something and you need to roll it back, or if there's an attack and you lose control of an admin and they make a change to GPO, you can roll all that back. And so there's a lot of cool stuff like that. And then over time, the portfolio has grown because Semperis was involved in actually working with customers as they went through disaster recovery. And so time and time again, you'd say, okay, well, we've recovered this forest, but the attacker was still resident in it. So it turns out we need to be able to do forensics on the recovered thing so that we know that the attacker is gone. Or we need to understand what the vulnerabilities were so we can protect. So it's like starting to integrate security into that recovery story. And then expanding from that to, hey, people should really understand, like we have the community tools, Forest Druid and Purple Knight, which are really about, for free, helping people understand what vulnerabilities are in their environment. But one of the things that kept coming up was, I'd say the two major movers. One is that when you lose your identity system, you may not be able to get into the building, right? Your card key might be slaved into Active Directory. For many customers, their recovery solutions are actually Active Directory authenticated, which means that if the identity system goes down, they can't get to the recovery data. Their VMs authenticate with Active Directory. I mean, there's this insane interdependency across identity. And the thing that we recognize is that people don't have an operational environment they can work in. Like, how are you going to call your team if you don't have any teleconferencing? You don't have email, you can't get to your address books, right? The thing that we did was we created an operational environment for crisis management teams for recovery, right? Fully isolated communications platform, key documents, the ability to go in and say, okay, there's a playbook here and we can run from this environment. If our normal environment is infected, either an attacker is controlling it or it's been contaminated with malware or ransomware, there's another place you can go to operate, right? And that's called Ready One. And that's the crisis management part of the story.
Okay.
So that's one thing I think is an exciting development that we talked about last year, but it's really starting to come into its own. And that's the thing that we actually have a version of that we give to everybody who uses our identity resilience.
Okay.
Because it's so important for identity resilience that we're like, well, you're not solving the problem if you're not giving somewhere to operate while the identity system is down. So that's actually given like an included license, right, with any of our normal stuff.
Nice.
The other thing that is, I'm particularly passionate about is this idea that identity isn't about a component. It's not about Active Directory. It's not about ping, it's not about Okta. It's about actually the way that these systems interoperate. And working on the identity security team and doing the incident response for identity, we saw this over and over again that, identity exists. I like to say it's like a fabric, right? There's all these interlocking components that create a surface area that you actually are interacting with. And so what you can do, what your permissions are, is really defined in that way. You authenticate as a user to just one of those things. But how did you get into the groups that you needed to be in? Well, that was, maybe that was your governance system. And how do permissions get set? Well, maybe that's in conditional access, and some of it's on, Duo is doing the MFA for you. Like it's an interlocked set of components that are doing this. And what we found from an attacker perspective is the attackers love to find the gaps between those systems and exploit those gaps. And so a great example of this was SolarWinds, where the network management software gave access to the file system, which gave access to the signing key for ADFS, which meant you could mint a token that could then get you in as admin with MFA to any dependent system, and in this case, the mail systems and EntraID and so on. So this kind of complexity is really interesting from both a resilience perspective and a security perspective. And so we're definitely rooted in Active Directory, and then kind of grew that out to support Entra as well, because that's where the majority of customers are. But we recently did an acquisition of a company called MightyID, which does a really nice job of supporting resilience for Okta and Ping, right? And primarily Okta, and the Ping stuff is nascent, but working on it, right? And that allows us to meet a lot more customers, but it also allows us to expand our lens for both resilience and security much more to that identity fabric.
Nice.
So that's kind of a cool, cool thing that's happened recently.
Yeah, I was gonna obviously really keen to chat to you about the MightyID piece. I was gonna sort of see like what, obviously that's the gap you mentioned there that it sort of filled.
Right.
How come you sort of thought that product would be better than maybe building your own? Was that ever in question, or?
I think even the simple cases are tricky. Like going back to Active Directory, the documented steps to recover an Active Directory for us is 30 manual steps. And if you mess any of them up, you start over.
Yeah.
Right. So having automation around that, and having automation that really understands the nuances of like, okay, this is what this topology implies, how this has to be done. Here's how you do it in a fast and resilient way. And I'm glossing a bunch of stuff over. That's important, right? When you think about a simple case of like Entra recovery, right? The object IDs for Entra are set by Entra at the creation of the object time, which means you cannot actually copy an object and replay it and have it retain its identity. It's actually a different object in Entra. It's like a brand new thing. It'll have the same name, it'll like looks the same, but so then okay, now I need to actually wire that back up into the groups that it used to belong to. But it's not that I'm just like reestablishing the user. I have to reestablish the user, figure out all the groups they ever belonged to, and then go reestablish the user in those groups, and then figure out what, like all that stuff changes, right? Like that's just one little example of like, this is not back up the server and replay it. It's just a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And so I think that the identity specific expertise is really important, even at a component level, right? Even if you're just doing Okta or you're just doing Entra. But again, where the real fun is in the fabric, right? That's where we start to see the really complicated, like, okay, so you lost your forest, we recovered it, but that means your timestamps are out, so Active Directory sync isn't working anymore, so let's figure out how to recover that. And then, let's like tune the ADFS rules, so that's got you back. And then any new objects we had to create up in Entra, let's make sure those are syncing correctly. And then, what is the implication for the policy between this and Okta? And like, and all of that is where I think having the depth that we have in identity, and the reason Semperis attracts people like me that, have 30 years in the business, well, not everybody's as old as I am, but is because, it's a fun and complicated space to get right. And it's also really critical. So I think building your own for Okta recovery, if you have like a serious passion and a lot of identity experience in-house, it's probably doable.
Yeah.
I don't want to poo-poo anybody's skill set. Like I'm sure there's some brilliant people in there, but it's
made sense.
Getting it right is, and it's one of those things that if you find out that you didn't quite get it right, and then you find that out while your business is down because the identity system is down, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So they're having something that's vetted and tested, and
you're
sure of is good.
What does the success look like in the next sort of 12, 18 months, post this acquisition, and with obviously the new tools and everything like that and the products? Yeah, I
think we have a lot of really cool things happening. I think like everybody else, we are investing and expanding what we're doing, and the question of how much we talked about, is always interesting. But I think the big ones are around, again, expanding our current portfolio to cover the fabric more, right, and looking at those interlocking components more. We are working on a platform which we currently call Lightning, which we may or may not stay with that name forever. But but Lightning is really built from the ground up for this problem space, for this fabric management space. It's also built just because we know it's going to be an issue, right? It's built from the ground up for agentic, right? So, and that doesn't mean that that's how you have to operate it, but everything that we do, we expose through APIs. There's very strong RBAC models, MCP on every interface. Like, it's just making sure that it's ready to both, take advantage of and be protected from that environment.
Yeah.
And that is coming real soon. As that comes to life, that gives us a place where we can start to really tell the story of, true identity resilience and true cyber resilience through identity at that fabric level, not at the component level. And that's exciting. That's gonna be a lot of fun.
You've already really touched on it, to be fair, throughout. It's all around the consolidation play, isn't it? Rather than it being all fragmented identity security. Is that what we're seeing?
There's certainly great people out there doing like identity security detection or identity posture, identity visibility, right? What we've seen in the incidents that we've helped with, which are a substantial number of them, is that you really do have to think of this as one problem.
Yeah.
And so really understanding how to connect the dots between the posture management and visibility and kind of vulnerability assessments you're doing before the attack starts, the detection and disruption of those attacks, containment of attacks, that happens, as the ongoing attacks are happening all the time, every second, right? It's just a matter of like, hopefully you can bat most of them away.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing that differentiates us is that we have this assumption that the eventual breach is a when, not an if. And it's like an uncomfortable thing to sit with. But it's like, no, you should assume that sooner or later somebody is going to, either get an admin account in your identity system or ransomware it. And if you're making that assumption, then you're training for an event that's going to happen. It means that, we have to provide the tools that lets you do tabletoping and lets you do rehearsal and, do after action reports and learn. And there's this kind of continuous wheel. The team at Microsoft, we did, as you'd expect, hundreds of cases a week.
Yeah.
And, we probably see stuff in the press 2 or 3 times a month. So that's a measure of how big the cases were. And one of the really key things was to have a PIR process, like a post-incident review process. And that said, okay, every incident that happens, let's learn from it. What are we going to change in the product? What are we changing in our response systems? How fast did we respond? How effective were we? And I think that helping organizations like think about their security response teams as elite teams that have to be able to perform really well. If you think about like, if you're at F1, you look at a pit crew, which I think are amazing.
Yeah,
right?
unbelievable.
They're always either training, right, executing or learning. Those are the 3 modes they're in. They're always, right? How do we help security teams, response teams get into that same modality?
Yeah.
And I think that, having that complete circuit, right, that we can say, okay, we're going to take what we know about your posture and help inform which of the detections that we have are more important. How does that change your prioritization for which things to fix in your posture and vice versa? How do we take what we know about the security environment and use that to inform, okay, you want to take a backup and recover it. What do we know about what's going on inside that environment from a security perspective? And then, how do we get all of that to operate in a way that your team is super efficient and able to be super professional, like a elite sports team, like where they're passing the ball effectively. And we think that the complete tool set together, highly focused on cyber resilience, like really focused on and through identity as the primary lens, is kind of how it ought to be.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing.
Sounds unreal. Yeah. Making some good moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
It's something I'm looking forward to on the documentary side of things, which is something I've obviously very rarely see. Midnight in the war room.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more
Such
about
a cool
that.
project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Thomas Leduc is our chief marketing officer and also very passionate about filmmaking. And I think we got lucky in that sort of intersection. And, again, you get to know people, you make friendships and things that are much like, I think what you see in the press will be, this actor did this thing and, compromised this file. And, but that doesn't tell really the story behind it, right? Like what's it like to be, like my story for SolarWinds is we had just dealt with a major incident that led us right up to Thanksgiving. I hadn't seen much of my family. Got through Thanksgiving Day and it was that quiet couple of days after Thanksgiving, getting ready to go into Christmas. And I got a call from my friend who he kind of worked in the office of the CISO for Microsoft. And he said, we have a big thing coming. I'm like, no, we don't. I'm like in total denial. And then, okay, what is it? It's like, okay, it's something to do with SolarWinds. We're like, there's some kind of, and this is the very earliest days before we'd done the investigation. And you're just like, oh man, here we go again. And I'm like, we ended up meeting with the executive team and this is during COVID, right? So like, we're all in our, offices. Mine is in the basement where my music stuff is. And my son, of course, has to live at home and it's like Christmas. And after, I've spent 3 weeks in the basement, 14 hours a day or something during the holidays, right? And it's kind 24th or 23rd of December. And I'm on a call with the executive team at Microsoft, like Satya's on the screen. My son walks in his pajamas. And he's like, hey, see my drumsticks? I'm like, oh, they're over there. And he's like, who's that? And that's Satya Nadella. He's like, president of Microsoft, CEO of Microsoft. And he goes, oh, hi, Satya. And Satya's like, hi. like that's not a story you're going to hear when you read like and that story is small, but the point is that like the human story of incident response, the human story of trying to secure these cyber systems is incredible.
Yeah.
And there's like a million stories that people can tell about the dark humor or, the exhaustion or the personal stress. I mean, I had people on my team that were physically threatened by actors, and we had to put people into secure housing, because they were successfully doxxed by the attackers. There's crazy things that happen in that environment, and it takes a human toll. It also creates, I think, some human heroics. It also creates some really funny stories. And the question of like, not just like, hey, do you think that reducing application permissions or making sure everybody's using phishing resistant MFA is more important? That's the question we usually ask a CISO, right? But like, what keeps you up at night now? What are you really worried about? Like, what are the consequences you're really worried about? Like, those kinds of things aren't conversations that we've typically had. And Midnight in the War Room is giving some space to a bunch of incredibly talented and important security people from all over the world and all over the industry to tell a little bit of their stories and their approach. Like, how do you tackle this incredibly Byzantine problem, right? And so it's a really cool, like it's entertaining and that it's very human. It's a lot of storytelling. It's incredibly educational to hear the wisdom of these people that are like, they've been in the trenches.
It's so much more powerful, isn't it, than just your typical marketing tool or product marketing or anything like that. And I think that's the reason why you've done it.
Well, I think it's that, and I think there's also, we should recognize that we must stand together. We will surely fall separately, right? I mean, like the alliances and the friendships we make in this industry, and the ability to pass wisdom around is everything.
Yeah.
When I was doing my incident response role, having the me of Google and the me of Facebook and the me, of Yahoo and such on speed dial.
Yeah.
And they could call me, I could call them. We had beers. We knew each other like that. Some cases, hung out at their houses. Like, that whole thing made a huge difference in terms of being able to act fast. And I think we're in the same place. We should recognize that what's at stake for cybersecurity is, like we tend to think about like, oh no, I lost control of my directory. Let's talk about what that means in a hospital. surgeries don't happen, people die.
Yeah.
Planes don't fly, and almost all these things you can end in, and then people die. But there's catastrophic, events that happen on the back end of an identity system going down, or really many systems going down. What we do is as an industry is really, really important.
So important.
We tend to live in that software abstraction layer, but at the end of the day, these systems all express physically, and they all express into people's lives. And so taking that responsibility seriously means that we are partners. We have to help. Like we all do it in different ways through different companies and the different specialities. But I think that ability to see each other as humans and to have that human story, and that's, I think, what Midnight in the War Room helps us do, reminds us that we're actually all fighting the same fight.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It'll be awesome.
I haven't seen it yet.
No?
Yeah, I'm not.
Are you gonna?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I'll be.
Yeah. Nice.
I've seen some clips.
Have you? You've seen some bits and bobs and powerful.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I need to get the dates and stuff like that. That's for sure.
Very good times.
Yeah. Awesome. What's the biggest, the one trend, coming out of RSA this year, you're sort of seeing, that you could maybe take home with you, so to speak, in the next 12 months?
I mean, the risk of repeating myself and also doing the thing I hate about hype. I do think that agentic is obviously, it's on everybody's mind or is worried about it. I see a lot of try not to be too controversial. I'm seeing a lot of tools that are like, oh look, here's an agent or whatever. I think great that people are starting down this pathway, but I think in some ways the most important thing about agentic is what it tells us about traditional security and just the importance of dealing with that debt.
Yeah.
The most important thing you can do for agentic is make sure that in some ways that you don't have too many permissions in your environment. You don't need agentic. It's not a new technology. It's just like, oh, go fix your, depending on your system, your ACLs or your policies or whatever it is that's protecting that stuff. But I do think that's clearly on everybody's mind. It's like on every billboard and every booth, everything you see is like, and I think for good reason. And I think that OpenClaw teaches us that, you're not going to control whether this technology is deployed. If your business doesn't shove it down your throat, your end user will. So you have to kind of prepare the ground for that. You know, what I think of as the crazy, brilliant 5-year-old running around and just playing with your stuff, right? So that's certainly a big one. I think that trend towards resilience in the face of, you know, political and geopolitical instability is another really big one that I'm seeing, where, you know, people are they're more focused on resilience, but they're being a lot more thoughtful about, like, I think for a long time we all sort of said, well, surely Amazon can never go down, right?
Yeah.
And then missiles hit data centers and Amazon goes down. And we recognize that, like, that they're, you know, we may be moving our money back into our mattresses a little bit. Like, this is, you know, do I put money in the banker, which is the cloud, or do I keep my day under my mattress? That's like stack, you know. I think we're moving some of that money back to the mattress. Like, people are starting to say, okay, there are core functions. And this is another trend I've seen with customers, where they're being more thoughtful about, like, what are the things that the business can stop doing and still survive?
Yeah.
And what are the things that the business has to do to survive? And the idea of actually having this kind of ring one business functionality, right? So for a hospital, for example, that would be, I must be able to treat critical patients, or I have to be able to run my ER. I'm watching The Pit, so which is great because it's all about, like, ransomware, right? This year, if you haven't seen it, the Pit, one of the central themes in The Pit this year is ransomware. So it's it's catering to nerds like us, right? But I think that understanding of, like, of resilience as, like, every other thing you do in security, surface area is your enemy. Yeah. And so if you're trying to say, well, my entire environment's going to stay up forever, right? Like, what you know, is that really achievable versus, okay, with my ring 0, it's probably core identity systems, and then ring 1, you know, the survival applications, the things that we can't render the critical service. And then, you know, ring 2 is maybe buildings in that ring 1, you know, like, but there's this interesting question of, like, how do you think about compartmentalization between these systems?
Yeah.
That I'm seeing more people talking about. Like the customer I was talking about, who actually has the threat model for, and has successfully built it for, the internet is down and I still have to do my thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Just one final question in terms of your space, obviously identity. What is your one biggest bold prediction that is going to come out of it, without maybe repeating yourself? Is there anything else that you sort of potentially seeing
for identity? So the curse of identity systems, like, every generation of identity systems, we're like, oh, we didn't quite get that right, so we introduce the next thing. So we start off with, like, no identity, and then it's like, oh wait, you know, I need to be actually make sure that it's not enough just to be on the network. So then I introduce, like, log on, and then I have, like, oh, for my app, you're gonna have a username and a password, like, it's, you know, Vax VMS, like, go way back, right? And we're like, ooh, that's not so good, you know, because those passwords, like, now I have to sign in over and over and over again for each app. So let me do single sign-on. So then we introduce, like, you know, directory, double directory or Active Directory, and we have single sign-on and Kerberos. And we're like, oh, that's all right, but we need to get out and get off the network, and, like, let's do this federation thing. So we introduce SAML. And every time you do this, you're like, and now we fixed it. And now we're going to move to this new generation, but you don't. And the reason is that you still have the resource on your environment that consumes Kerberos, or it consumes SAML, or it doesn't matter what the next thing is. The thing that holds you back is the weight of the applications that use the old thing, right? So my bold prediction is that one of the useful use cases for generative AI is to go through, so you say, oh, I'm using, you know, ancient username, password, whatever, therefore I can't do MFA. Say, using an example, can't use passkey because my system doesn't support it. A useful use case for generative AI is go rewrite my COBOL app that was written in 1982 to consume OAuth, right? Okay. And if we can do that at scale, right, we can actually start to move away from legacy identity, and that's exciting to think about. Wow. Now, the tension point, people want to go back on-prem.
Yeah, so that's a big one though. I like that, nice and bold, unreal. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks so much for joining us on the Hubscale Podcast.
All right.
It's been great.
Lots of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.